Which of those two teams, though, do you have more faith going on the road, Baltimore or Houston?
Oh, Baltimore.
Kansas City or Houston?
Kansas City.
Buffalo or Houston?
Buffalo.
Cincinnati or Houston?
Cincinnati.
Yeah. Does CJ Stroud have a road problem? I've been hearing the coaches talk about, the crowd noise and the coverages can be attributed to the crowd and all this stuff. And I saw this article on CBS that posted CJ Stroud's home road splits in his career. Now, Houston Texans have lost how many games this year? They've lost twice. Mm-hmm. Both of those games have come on the road, at Minnesota, at Green Bay. CJ Stroud, if you just go win-loss record, in his career is 9-2 whenever he's at home. On the road, he's a below-average quarterback at 5-6. So 7 games above 500 on the year, 9-2 at home. He's 5-6 in road games. All right, well, it's tougher to win on the road in the NFL. How about the other stuff? Passing yards per game at home for CJ Stroud, 311. On the road, 213.5. The gap between home, road, and passing yards per game is nearly 100 for C.J. Stroud. That is a big number. Okay, well, what about touchdowns, interceptions? 21-5 at home, good. 12-4 on the road. So he's actually throwing less interceptions, but he's only throwing 12 touchdowns. He's -9 in touchdowns. What about passer rating? Stroud at home, 106.3. On the road, 90.5. If you look at some of C.J. Stroud's worst games that he's had in his career, they've also come on the road. Most recently at Green Bay, at Lambeau Field, 10 for 21, 86 yards. The game in Minnesota, he actually threw for 215, but he was 20 for 31 through 2 picks. Remember back last year in the games where he was abysmal? On the road, lost to Zach Wilson. Now, he was concussed in the game. Some would argue he was concussed in the game prior, but he was 10 for 23, 91 yards on the road. What about the loss to Carolina, the lowly Carolina Panthers, 16 for 24, 140 yards? So I ask again, 713-780-ESPN, HRMP listener line, 713-780-3776. Does C.J. Stroud have a road problem?
I mean, have you guys checked the batter's eye on the road? I mean, this is kind of Astros-esque, except for on the reverse. Because D'Amico was saying it the other day, the offensive line problems can be attributed to a loud stadium on the road. I think when you look at it from the standpoint of how do you want to compartmentalize it, do you want to just kind of chalk it up for being on the road? That's fine, but I hope internally you're paying more attention to those things. If it is the fact that with a loud, we hear about all the teams that pump in all the noise during the week at practice so that they, from the offensive line to the quarterbacks to the offense as a whole, that they get used to it so that they can adjust accordingly, silent counts, all the things that they need to do, that maybe that they're not doing enough of that during the course of the preparation in the week to get you ready for these road games, because there is something to it if you look at those kind of numbers where it's not just a 2-1 or a 1-2 record or a 3-4 record. When you start talking about that many games and he hasn't been in the league that long, that overall it starts with CJ, as we know, but also we have already kind of highlighted how important the offensive line is, that on both ends it tells you that maybe they need to do more prep work during the week, getting ready for road games as it relates to the noise and the ability to still function, especially in the passing game, when you're dealing with a hostile environment.
I don't think it's a matter of not doing enough. I think every NFL team is working hard throughout the week, and D'Amico was asked about it yesterday on Wednesday about what they do to simulate road crowds. Like, we pump in the noise, we do everything that other teams do, but I wonder if there is something else they can do. I have no I totally believe that they're logging the hours. I totally believe they're doing things that they feel like they should do, but I wonder if maybe they should look outside and do other things that maybe they're not doing. I don't think it's a matter of effort or hard work.
I'm not saying about the amount of hours they put in, but when you start thinking about when we've talked about and they've talked about the chemistry issues, the communication issues as it relates to the offensive line and or between CJ and Juice and reading the defenses and calling out the audibles and picking up the Mike linebacker and all those things, that I'm sure they're putting plenty of work in on the practice field, but as it relates to work in these game type situations with that kind of noise, with that urgency, with that play clock, and the fact that when you point to some, the numbers and you start digging deeper, you can look at it and say, look, a lot of these, and when you hear the post-game comments, are related to things that can be correlated to that sound and that communication when it is loud.
0979 says you nailed it, Cheesehead. And for me to answer this question, I don't think this is a CJ Stroud issue per se. I think it's an offensive issue. And then CJ Stroud, like the quarterback of most offenses, is the figurehead of the entire offense. Well, this quarterback is great. Well, there are other things that go into it that make the quarterback great. Well, this quarterback's a bum. Well, there are other things that go into it that make the quarterback a bum. It's a big reason why the coaches say that the quarterbacks often get too much praise and often get too much blame. So I don't think per se that it's CJ Stroud that has the road problem, but I do think that the offense for the Houston Texans has a road problem. And yes, Minnesota's defense is good and Green Bay's defense is good, so you didn't look good in those road games. But the offense is night and day at home versus the road, and you can even go back to last year, same quarterback, same coaching staff, same play caller, same offensive coordinator, where you were losing road games to some of the worst teams in the NFL. So does Stroud have a home away problem? I wouldn't say he does individually, but I do think that the Texans' offense has a home away problem.
It's going to take me a lot more before I start criticizing C.J. Stroud and saying I'm really worried about C.J. Stroud alone on the road. Because unlike in basketball, when it's an individual, and an individual, yeah, he's playing on a team, but an individual that is an above-average superstar-type player, he's going to get his no matter what. He doesn't have to rely on his teammates as much if he's that type of player. Baseball, a pitcher can still mow you down regardless of what kind of hitting he gets. Hitting the same way depending on whatever the rest of his team does. But in football, it's correlated to your offensive line. It's correlated to the ability to have the chemistry and the timing with the elements, with the things. It's all got to come together. It's all pieces of a puzzle that allows everybody to have that success. So I'm not pointing the finger at CJ, but I'm saying as a team, we're not rocket scientists by any means, but you can see the correlation between road games and and they've even mentioned it, and the fact that maybe they should be trying to figure out what are those elements that they could be working on or change up the way they're working on.
Speak for yourself. I was a math major for a semester.
Okay.
Texans.
That makes you a rocket scientist?
Yeah, for a semester. Texans are 3-0 at home this year, 2-2 away. Last year they were 6-3 at home, 4-4 away. And we mentioned the Stroud numbers. So does Stroud have an away problem? Does the Texans offense have a road issue? 713-780-ESPN, HRP listener line, 713-780-3776. The other thing that you have to factor in, if the Texans are a playoff team, and maybe that's putting the cart ahead of the horse because, look, Sunday is going to be a battle for first place. You lose the game. Colts are tied with you. You win the game. You have a 2-game lead, plus you own the tiebreaker over the Colts. So Sunday's critical. But if this is an issue where the offense, like let's just put it on a scale of 1 to 10, the offense at home plays to the level of an 8. Whenever they're on the road, they play to the level of a 4. I would argue that the Houston Texans, of the other contenders in the AFC, not the same caliber, Kansas City, Baltimore, whoever you want, maybe even Buffalo, those teams I don't think need home field advantage. Houston Texans, if this keeps up, absolutely need home field advantage.
Yeah, I think it's a big key. I think Buffalo's a team that if you would say they need home field advantage, it's because they can play a certain style in the snow that a lot of teams aren't prepped for. And depending on who you play in your conference, that could be an advantage for them. But look, they've got a proven quarterback. They've got enough weapons on both sides of the football. And they're battle-tested enough in the playoffs that they can probably play either place, and they're going to be competitive. We've seen the opposite with the Texans when they're on the road. And granted, those 2 games in Baltimore, it's the same team, but you're on the road. One, it was colder, but the bottom line was Baltimore didn't change, and you didn't either. And so you've got to be better.
Which of those 2 teams, though, do you have more faith going on the road, Baltimore or Houston?
Oh, Baltimore.
Kansas City or Houston?
Kansas City.
Buffalo or Houston?
Buffalo.
Cincinnati or Houston?
Cincinnati.
Yeah. 713-780-ESPN. Let's go out to the HRP listener line. Dave in Pearland, you're in the Hive of the Bees. What's up, Dave?
Hey, what's up, man? Hey, I'm listening to what you guys are saying. I kind of agree to a certain extent, but also disagree. Because I think most teams have a bad record on the road. It's just kind of go with the home cooking as opposed to being on the road. And secondly, he has less than 25 games. So even though we've anointed him the next Tom Brady, he has a lot of learning still to do. He's still got learning to do. So, I just think we need more time before we start labeling that.
That's fair.
Appreciate the call, Dave. Yeah, no, that is fair. But at the same time, we're kind of summing it up by saying we're not pointing the finger directly at CJ. We're pointing the finger on the fact that the entire offense can be derailed right now, or at least apparently can be derailed in a hostile environment on the road. Mediocre, middle-of-the-road teams, their hopes are at the end of the season to finish 500 on the road because the road's a tough place to play. But if you are trying to be and you have the belief that you can be one of the upper echelon teams in this league, then you plan on going on the road and doing better. And you plan on having a winning record on the road just like you have a winning record at home. And that's where the difference lies as you're trying to get to a place where everybody thinks they can get.
Yeah, the win-loss is something that maybe you can't put a whole lot of stock in because Dave is right. You're normally going to have a better record at home than you are the road. But all of a sudden, it's 100 less passing yards per game. The passer rating is lower, 16 points lower. And this year's too small of a sample to look at the best teams in the NFL, their home road record. But last year in the NFL, 10-win teams on the road. Pittsburgh on the road, 5-3, a better record on the road. The Rams were 5-4. Dolphins won 11 games. They were 7-2 at home, 4-4 on the road. So that's not a great split there. Philadelphia 5-4 on the road. Cleveland 3-5 on the road, 8-1 at home. So bad split there. Kansas City was 5-4 at home, 6-2 on the road. Ooh. Buffalo 4-4 at home, not great. Detroit 6-3 on the road.
Wait,
Dallas,
Buffalo was 4-4 at home.
No, they were 4-4 away. They were 7-2 at home. Yeah. Not a great split. Detroit 6-2 at home, 6-3 on the road. Dallas 8-0 at home, 4-5 on the road. Maybe that was the biggest sign that they were a fraud. San Francisco 5-3 at home, 7-2 away. Baltimore 6-3 at home, 7-1 away. Ooh. So a lot of those teams that had 10 wins were actually better on the road than they were at home. Brian, do you have any thoughts that maybe the Texans aren't so great away from home?
I share some of your sentiments that I don't think it's necessarily a CJ Stroud issue, but a Texans offense as a whole. If I was going to nail it down to anything specifically, it's been what we talked about, the majority of the last two shows, the offensive line, the protection in front of CJ. I don't think it's necessarily a CJ Stroud thing. I think it's an offensive line thing, whether it be the injuries and kind of just the moving chairs that moved in starters in and out of the lineup last year or this year with guys not performing well, specifically in the interior of the offensive line. I'd like any quarterback, CJ, if you don't protect him, and he certainly wasn't protected against Minnesota or Green Bay this year, is going to struggle, and I think that's a large part of it. Now, I will say, if we're going to point some blame at CJ, when you look at some of the games both last year and this year, and it would be natural. He's the first-year quarterback last year, second-year quarterback this year, but he does seem to drop off quite a bit against the upper-level defenses, which isn't uncommon for anyone, much less a young quarterback. But I think this is mostly an offensive line protection issue. Doesn't protect well when they can't communicate in loud environments, and then CJ struggling against the upper-level defenses.